Give a little background, more so than the beard. I was born a cradle Catholic. I hope you know what that is if you are cradle Catholic. If not, I was born into a Catholic family. I went to Catholic middle school. I went to Catholic high school. I actually went to the Catholic high school because that is its name. So very creative. And so I was always a part of the faith, always in the faith, and there came a point in my life where you have to make that decision to actually embrace the faith when you're cradle Catholic. Like, I was brought up in it, I went to Mass every Sunday with my family, but there came a point in high school when I actually started taking the faith as my own, started doing things on my own. I started joined my parish youth group and started actually embracing the faith and having a love for the faith. And so it was with that. It was about junior year in high school when, after class one day, randomly, or it seemed randomly at the time, that of all people, my chemistry teacher, whom we affectionately called Party Frat Pat, my chemistry teacher, he told me after class that, "Brian, I think you'd be a good priest." And so that's what first got me discerning, first figuring out what my call was, or what I was called to in my life. Like, am I called to be married, or am I called to be a priest? What is my calling? And so, junior year in high school, there's a lot of things going on. Not only was I trying to figure out whether I was supposed to be married or be a priest, I was also trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college, what I wanted to major in. Like, there's all these decisions. Like, I applied to places, was accepted, I had ideas, and it's like, oh, it'd be cool to be a teacher, it'd be cool to be a woodsman, I don't know. So I'm just kind of up in the air. But there's all those decisions, and they all are very pressing and seem like they need to be answered immediately. And it's very scary. And so the first kind of challenge I found in discernment was discernment isn't a choice between a good and a bad thing. It's actually a choice between two goods. So the easiest way I found to explain this, I actually worked at an ice cream shop in high school. I don't know if you guys have any high school jobs, but worked at an ice cream shop, scooped a lot of ice cream, so I love my ice cream. So chocolate and vanilla. I love both flavors. Chocolate's awesome, it's rich. Vanilla's that plain, delicious. So they're both good. In my eyes, they're both equally good. Some days I like chocolate better, some days I like vanilla. It's hard. It's a choice between two goods. If you ask me, I was like, I don't know. I'll scoop of both, please. But the difference is, like, it's not a choice between a good and a bad thing. If it was a choice between a scoop of chocolate ice cream and a scorpion, then it's a really easy choice. It's like, I'll take the ice cream. So that's the same with discernment. Discernment's not a good and a bad choice. It's a choice between two goods. Marriage is a really great good, and priesthood is an incredibly great good. And so that's what makes it so hard. And so part of this discerning what of these two goods I'm called to, I had to figure out how God made my heart. God's made each of your hearts to love in a particular way. And so it's in figuring out how your heart loves is where you can find your vocation. So, for example, again, in high school, I dated a lot of young women in high school. I had good relationships and bad relationships. But across the board, with every relationship, it always felt like something was missing. Even the last girl I dated before entering seminary, she was a very good Catholic woman, very strong in the faith. We prayed together, we went to Mass together. Like, it was as good as a relationship I could possibly have. And there was still, it felt like something was missing. Like, I loved her, or I thought I loved her. I mean, I loved her as much as I could, and still there was this part of me missing. There was part of me longing, part of me. And so that was part of me figuring out my heart was designed to love a different way. Because the heart of a married man is designed to love one particular woman, while the heart of a priest is designed to love all people. And so that was that first challenge in discernment, trying to figure out between these two goods. The second challenge I kind of ran into as I was trying to figure out which good I was called to. In high school, I was praying and talking to God, and I found out discernment is not like a lightning bolt. Most often, it's not like St. Paul, where St. Paul was knocked off his horse and he hears the voice of Jesus saying, "Paul, why are you persecuting me?" Or Saul at that time. "Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And it's not a big event normally. Discernment, more often than not, is just choosing to follow Christ each and every day. It's choosing to follow God each and every day. And so I had that problem. I wanted to know immediately. You want to know now. We live in an instant world. There's so many instantaneous things. I can send out a tweet right now saying, hey, I'm giving a talk, and like take a shot of me with all of you in the background. It'll look great, and get like 50,000 likes if I had that many followers. But so it's not instantaneous, and we're so used to everything being instantaneous. If it takes more than 5 seconds to load, we're throwing the computer out the window. So we need to learn to have that patience, to have that ability to wait for Christ to show us the way and just follow Christ each and every day. And so I got to the point where I was making up signs. What I mean by that is one day I would be walking home or something, or walking from my car into the house, and I'd see like a cobweb in the bush, and I'd be like, that's a sign from God. I'm called to be a priest. And then that very next day, I would be like walking into school, and there was a dog that lived at our school. Brother Richard had him, Zeke. And so I'd see Zeke walking down the hallway, I'd be like, that's a sign from God. I'm called to be married. Just completely ridiculous stuff. So I just wanted to know that answer so immediately that I started making up signs. And so it was at this point I got a very good piece of advice from another seminarian who's a good friend of mine. And he told me, forget about that. Forget about knowing what you're going to do. Forget about knowing everything immediately and having all the answers. And just start praying every day and saying, God, help me want what you want. Start praying to desire God's will. Start trying to follow God's will. And so there's a little chapel in our high school, in the Catholic high school. There's a little chapel there, and so he told me, just go to the chapel every time after school, and just take 10 minutes and pray every day. And so I started doing that. I started praying, God, help me desire your will. Help me want what you want. And so that's when I came to my third challenge in my own discernment. And this third challenge was actually a challenge of selfishness. So when I first began this prayer, it wasn't as nice as that. I wasn't like, God, take me. I want anything that you want for me. I give myself to you. When I first began this kind of 10-minute prayer routine, I was like, all right, God, I want to be married. I want to have a great wife. She's got to be beautiful. I want a dog. He's going to be awesome and learn all the tricks. Going to have a family. Going to have a great house, awesome car. I want all these things. Please bless them. It's going to be great. I promise. Have a nice day. And so what I was doing was I was coming to God with all of my wants and desires and not truly asking Him what He wanted for me. And so I was just bringing my wants and desires to Him and saying, hey, please bless these. And so in that, and in praying that every day, and I started praying more and more, and I realized I was asking God to just bless my wants. And so it wasn't until I found out I was doing that through actually a help of a priest. It's very good to get help and bounce things off someone who's well-versed in the spiritual life. And so he kind of helped me see what I was doing. And so it wasn't until I started letting go of those things I wanted, letting go of my desires or my wants, and truly wanting what God wanted for me, is when I really truly began discerning and could actually have seminary as a viable option in my life. And then this final challenge I experienced was fear. So I've gotten through everything. I'm choosing between two goods. I'm truly trying to follow Christ every day. I'm trying to follow His will for me every day. But there's still that fear. Because at this point, I knew I had that inkling. I knew I was called to seminary, but I was still afraid to take that step. And so this final challenge in discernment for me was my own fear. And so I experienced two different kinds of fear. A fear of decisions and a fear of the unknown. And this fear of decisions is the easiest way I can explain it. So imagine you're in a room, and there's doors all around you, and you're just dead center in the middle of the room, and each of these doors is a different decision. And so, for example, if I was choosing to go to college, I was accepted to multiple places. They're all goods. I was accepted to Benedictine, the University of Wyoming of all places, and the University of Arkansas. So we have these three doors in front of me. They're all goods. They all seem pretty equal. There's some goods and bads. And so I had the fear of decision in that if I went through one door, I couldn't go through the other doors. You can't attend all three universities at once. So I was afraid to make a choice. I wanted to keep my options open. And so if I went through one door, it would close off the others. And so you're in the middle of this room, surrounded by doors, all these different choices. There's seminary, there's school, there's your major, there's people, friends, there's all sorts of different choices, all these different doors, and when you go through one, you can't go through another. And so by not making a decision, I made a decision. My indecision was a decision. I was just stuck in the middle of that room, not doing anything, which is the worst possible thing I could have done. It's way better to make a decision and live to regret about it a little bit than just waste your life away and do nothing. And so that was my first fear. I had this fear of decision. I didn't want to make a choice. My second fear was the fear of the unknown. And so the easiest way for me to visualize this is if you can't see anything. It's completely dark. You can't even see your hand in front of your face. And you're just standing there. And you have to take a step. But that first step is very scary. Because you don't know what you're going to step on, you don't know what you're stepping out to. I don't know if that floor is flat or if that's the edge of a cliff. I don't know where that first step is going. And that first step is the hardest step. Because that first step is the leap of faith. And so it's not until you actually take that leap of faith and take that first step that you can actually do anything, that you actually can follow Jesus and follow Christ. Just like the rich young man who went away sad because Jesus said, you go and sell everything you have. He was at the same moment I was in. He still has hope. Because that rich young man still has the opportunity to take that first step, that first leap of faith. And so did I. So even though he went away sad, even though I went away sad and was scared and had all these wants and desires and had all these fears and different things, I still have the opportunity to take that first step. And so I took that first step, that first leap of faith, to follow Christ. And so it was through the help, again, of different priests and our vocation director who helped calm these fears and kind of help explain things to me and help me take that first step towards seminary. And so I ended up, the end of my senior year in high school, I signed to enter seminary. I came up here to Conception, and this is my final year, so I'm happy to say that this next year I'll be going to theology at St. Margaret Seminary and continuing on in priestly formation. So thank you all.
All right, next we're going to move on to another talk. The main topic of this talk is the joys of discernment.
That's a great question. Diocese of Wichita? Wichita.
No.
Wichita.
Diocese of Wichita.
At Kansas one. Probably Wichita.
Wichita.
Humble.
I barely know the man.
I only see him like once every week, so I'm not sure.
Reserved.
Tall.
Eccentric.
Studious. Duck.
Funny.
Pretty sure. Smart. Different. Patty.
Library owner.
Pat Daddy.
I have no idea. I'll go with Mac Daddy.
Patrick. I don't know.
Tonto. P-Mac.
Patty Bag. Pat Daddy.
I don't know who said I was tall. Let's begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. A reading according to the Holy Gospel of Luke. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. and there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and rich, and he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not on account of the crowd, because he was small of stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he made haste and came down, and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all murmured, he has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. A lot of times, I'm sure many of you have heard of this before, but people, when they talk about vocations, they say, once you find your vocation, like you'll be happiest. Like that's where you'll be happiest in your life. And when I was a senior in high school and decided to go into seminary, that's really what I bought into, and I believed it. And I kind of took it the wrong way, and I thought that just because I was in seminary, I was going to be happy, that I was going to have joy. I thought just because I took that step that all of a sudden everything was going to be all right, and I had figured everything out. And then I got to seminary with that attitude that I was immediately going to find joy. But I soon got to this point where I was not very happy. I wasn't satisfied with what I found. I fell into a lot of the same habits of complaining and gossiping, and really just being negative about a lot of things, which is very unjoyful. And I really just kind of became one amongst the crowd of all the people, just like Zacchaeus was. And I realized that I was trying to fill that hole in my heart with just things. I was trying to fill it with, maybe just this concept of the seminary, or video games, or sports, or even relationships that I had at that time. And it wasn't until I realized that as long as I was looking for something, I wasn't going to be happy. Just like Zacchaeus, he was a rich tax collector. He had everything that he could have wanted. And in the same way, he was just looking for things. But in that passage, we see that Zacchaeus stopped looking for something and began looking for someone. And that's when everything turns around. And that someone is Jesus. Jesus is the key to being joyful. He is the key to anything in our lives, and especially for discernment. I was looking for happiness and all these things, but I never was looking for it in the person of Jesus. A lot of times I would talk about Jesus, and even in prayer I would talk about God, but I realized that I wasn't talking with God. I wasn't talking with Jesus. And while I was feeling alone in that first year of seminary, that was a very joyful realization that in discernment, we are not alone, because discernment takes place in that relationship with Jesus. And it ultimately boils down to just love. St. Therese says when she found her vocation, she said, "My vocation is to love." And you guys don't have to worry about that. We don't have to discern that one. Some people aren't. It's not like some people are called to love and others aren't. We all are called to love. And when we are looking for our particular vocation in our life, it's discerning how we are going to love, how we are going to love others. When we think about discernment, it's not about just trying to figure out which career we're going to go into or what college that we're going to go into. It's trying to figure out how are we going to love Jesus and how are we going to love others through that. And how, like Zacchaeus, are we going to receive him joyfully? One of the best examples of this, just desire to love, and discernment especially. Many of you may know or have heard of a man named Brian Bergkamp. He was a good friend of mine, and he was a seminarian for the Diocese of Wichita. And last summer, he was in a canoe or a kayak, and he was with a group of friends in this kayak, and they were going down the river where they hit some rough waters. And the kayak ended turning over, and everybody else fell out, but Brian, he was still in the kayak. And he saw that one of the girls that he was with was struggling in the water. And now Brian in that moment had a decision to make. He could either stay in that boat and protect himself, or he could help that woman. And he chose to help her. He jumped out of the boat and he helped her get safely to the shore. But sadly, Brian was not able to get to the shore. Brian died in that accident last summer, but he died because he loved. And that's what we are all called to do. He was so in love with Jesus, and he was so in tune with what he was called to do, that in that moment, he was able to give himself completely. And I know that brought him so much joy. I know that earlier in his life, he said that he wanted to be a fireman because he wanted to give his life to others. And that's what he did. And that's what he was doing through discernment before that. And so that we have the same option. Because just like Zacchaeus, we are up in that tree. We are looking at Jesus, and Jesus says to us, "Make haste and come down. Come to me and receive me joyfully." And once we find that joy, the question arises of how do we know that it is true joy? And the way that we can tell that it's true joy is when we give ourselves to others. I mean, Brian was a great example of that. He gave himself in the most radical way that one can, by giving his life. And not all of us are called to give ourselves as radically as that, but we are all called to the same love, to the same joy. And that's what the priesthood ultimately is. That's what all of us here at the seminary, and everybody who is discerning a vocation, should be discerning. How is Jesus calling me to come down from my tree and to love Jesus and to love others? How am I going to receive him joyfully? So when we think about our own lives, we shouldn't stay up in our tree. What would have happened if Zacchaeus would have stayed up in his tree and never came down when Jesus called him? What would have happened if Brian would have stayed in the boat and didn't answer to that call of love? And what will happen if you today stay in your tree? Because Jesus is calling each and every one of you to come out of that, to make haste and come down just like Zacchaeus did, and to receive him joyfully. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Patrick. So I hope that gives you a little bit to think about, and we'll get to that. But before we go, I just have a few more things. Tonight there will be confession available outside of the oratory. The oratory is where you pray evening prayer. There will be 3 priests, and one of the priests can do bilingual with Spanish and English if you need. At 9:15, as you see on your schedule, there is a sport. That sport is dodgeball. Dodgeball will be held in St. Michael's Gym. It will go for roughly an hour. Just trust me, you'll need your sleep. But if you don't know where St. Michael's Gym is, ask your ambassador. At 2:30, you guys should meet back with your ambassadors in the small groups that I'm about to assign you. and your designated spot for night prayer and reflection time. So the small groups that we're about to go to now are meant to serve as an aid to help you in talking about the talks that Brian and Patrick gave. And at night, it'll be more of a reflection of your time here and how you feel about the priesthood. Tomorrow, I'll be putting up a sign-up sheet for Emmaus Walks with the 4 speakers. Emmaus Walk will be just about a 15-minute walk, and you can just talk, just man to man, seminarian to retreatant, I guess. And so we'll have that scheduled for you guys tomorrow. If any of these speakers just really kind of interest you and you want to talk to them a little bit further, we can have that available for you. There's a question box. If you look to your right, there's the fancy signage, and there's a box, cardboard. It is a question box. Tomorrow we'll be having a Q&A session. Thank you.